Thank you so much to all of our afternoon speakers. There were so many incredible breakout sessions, and our speakers throughout the past 2 days. Just really appreciate everyone. Our keynotes to the breakouts, it's been incredible. Thank you again to our conference content committee for helping us craft this program, and thank you to all of our volunteers at this conference as well. So we have the headliner. I am so excited to introduce our afternoon keynote speaker, the Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Kim Driscoll. Kim Driscoll is the 73rd Lieutenant Governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. She was sworn in on January 5th, 2023, joining Governor Maura Healey in a historic series of firsts. Governor Healey is the first woman and first openly LGBTQ person elected governor of Massachusetts, and together, Healey and Driscoll are the first all-woman executive team to lead Massachusetts. Since taking office, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll has led several administration priorities and initiatives, exemplified by her extensive and successful career in local government, which we're going to chat about today. Driscoll has served as a notable proponent for the economic development of Massachusetts cities and towns and serves as a liaison for municipalities across the state. This commitment also includes leadership on tackling the state's housing crisis and improving the state's public education policy. Driscoll also chairs the Governor's Council to address sexual assault, domestic violence, and human trafficking, the Seaport Economic Council, and co-chairs the STEM Advisory Council. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll.
Thank you, Joe, for that very warm introduction. And am I really between you getting out of here, me? I hope there's a cocktail hour or something afterwards, or maybe I don't, because that would make you want to leave faster. So it's great to be with all of you, and thanks so much to Boston Harbor Now for fostering this along with the Stone Living Lab for the investments they make, really to try and not only bring people together to collaborate, but to make us better every single day. We're so fortunate in Massachusetts that we have people who are willing to give of themselves and their talent to help us solve some of the world's toughest challenges, and I'd put climate change right up there. As an administration, we often talk about the climate crisis as one of our biggest threats, and I'd say we also think of it as an opportunity to grow our economy, to gain a competitive edge, to be better stewards of our natural resources, and certainly to think about how we can support local communities and be more equitable. This, for Massachusetts, is nothing new, being a national leader, finding ways to tackle hard problems and make the impossible possible. I like to think it gives us an opportunity to be a better ancestor, the actions that we take today. Now, we're also the state of firsts. I left Lexington this morning where we're about to kick off the 250th anniversary of the founding of democracy. Not a small deal. Seems like something to celebrate, especially now. But we also were home to the first public park and the first library, the first state for marriage equality, the first state for universal health care. I could go on with a long list of firsts. And I'm fortunate to live in a city that's also pretty historic. So I see it, and every day I live, the stewards of history that Massachusetts is and the opportunities that it allows for all of us. I think it's what's fostered this ecosystem of innovation. I didn't have the good fortune to be born here in Massachusetts or grow up here. I was born in Hawaii. My dad was in the Navy, so a bit of a Navy brat, moved around a lot. I came here to go to college. I landed in Salem, Massachusetts, a city with a storied history. We weren't so great to women in 1692, that's for sure, but I think we've overcome that. But what I saw was this culture of a place that for 400 years welcomed immigrants and brought great prominence to this country. Salem was home to the first millionaire in America, Elias Haskett Derby. Tiny clipper ships sailed around the globe out of Salem Port, bringing back amazing riches and wares from Sumatra. These were 16-year-old sea captains who captained some of these tiny ships. I have a 19-year-old I can't get to pick up a wet towel off the floor, so I find this to be very, very, very impressive. I say that history because I think it's built into who we are. We foster this innovation. We have this ecosystem for talent, and I think we, in our administration, are trying to harness our potential. What is in front of us? How do we tackle it? Which is why we've made this climate a huge priority for our administration. Our ability to do what others sometimes would prefer not to do. We hired the first ever climate chief, Melissa Hoffer. I think she was your keynote speaker last year. It's really important that you have somebody in government that is allowing us to look at impacts of climate, whether we're talking about housing or transportation or education or workforce development. We know that this climate crisis touches all of those areas, and unless you have somebody on the team that's saying, hey, wait a minute, and looking at things through that lens, you tend to get a little siloed and just start marching down a pathway. Super important. I think we're the first ever, and I think she's still the only cabinet level position. Just focus on climate and thinking about how we integrate that in the work that we do every single day. Because the reality is addressing climate change just doesn't have a one-size-fits-all solution. There's no one action or one person or one group that can solve this all on their own. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take buy-in, collaboration from local and state government. As someone who was a local leader for a very long time, you have infrastructure needs. You can't do that all on your own. You're going to need partners. We know that we need corporations and private sector partners to step up, academics, nonprofits, and residents to own this piece of it. And that can be really hard if you live in a community and want to give back to this. Like, what's the action item that you can take on? It takes all of us to move the needle, and I think we've shown here with the history of our state, when we come together, we're more able to make significant changes. We're better able to support communities and certainly create policies that push us forward. Some of those policies that we're really proud of, and we think these are the things that are going to help us as we build in the future, have to do with some recent actions. Our climate bill, really proud to get a climate bill adopted through the legislature. It was tough. It almost didn't make it out a couple of times. But some of the things it does is eliminates a lot of the red tape to make some of the upgrades and improvements that we know we need to make, whether it's more and better energy options for homes, how we modernize our grid. As an old state, we have lots of old infrastructure. The grid is a part of that. How we help expand energy options. I think many of you know we're really pushing hard for offshore wind, but frankly, clean energy of all different types. And we're a state that's growing. Every month, we need more energy than the last. We want to be as efficient as we can, but when you're also growing, that's a big piece of it. That means we've got to find ways to ensure that we're improving the grid, getting different energy options out and faster. The Mass Leads Act was a big part of our economic development work. You know, every 5 years, the state is tasked with coming up with a new economic development plan. What are the strategies that we're going to focus on? And then what's the investment we're going to put behind it? So we embarked on that plan, led by our Secretary of Economic Development, Yvonne Howe. This entails going to lots of different regions. We're a big state when you've got to get around it, and understanding what's happening regionally, what are the economic development strategies that are important, and then you're thinking of it through the lens of statewide. Well, when this last Mass Leads Act and the Leading Future Generations Economic Development Strategy was completed, it included a $1 billion investment for climate tech. Now, if we were talking about an economic development plan just 5 years earlier, I'm not sure people would even know how to define climate tech or wouldn't have an idea of what it meant when you said that word. For us, it means investing in clean energy, investing in decarbonization opportunities, and investing in technologies that help create more efficiencies. So you can think about it, I think of it as both the software and the hardware and the innovation and the generation. For us, having some dollars that we have skin in the game to accelerate some of the work that's already underway, having a quasi-state government agency, the Clean Energy Center, just focused on putting people in the room who are working in this ecosystem, finding ways to support them with dollars or with technical support, scaling up opportunities for them to be able to showcase some of these efficiencies or clean energy options or ways that we can decarbonize is really part of that. Time Magazine ranked the top 100 companies working in this space of climate tech. We had almost 30 of them right here in Massachusetts. So it's an important ecosystem when you think about putting people together who have similar talents, and then raising the venture capital, working to assist with acceleration and grant opportunities to lower their costs in those early days. So an important part of this Mass Leads Act for us is not only making the investments so we have skin in the game, but also doing our part given the responsibility we have with lots of smart, talented individuals who are here and really trying to leverage that. But that's not all we've done. We've also launched a climate infrastructure bank. This is one of the first in the nation's opportunity to invest specifically in affordable housing. You should know the state of Massachusetts has the most publicly owned housing of any state in the country. There was a time when HUD actually used to build housing, particularly affordable housing. Massachusetts piggybacked on that. So whatever federal housing was built, we always added a state complement. We've got nearly 40,000 units of state housing, most of which was built in the 50s and the 60s. So when you have 40,000 units of state housing that was built in the 50s and 60s, there's lots of opportunities to modernize. This climate bank is particularly focused on utilizing affordable housing as a means to help make them more efficient, driving down operational cost, at the same time modernizing some of those structures. We think we can help with the sector that's really focused on decarbonization. And I was at one of our recent grant announcements for some funding tied to the climate bank. There are 9 different types of insulation materials that we are trying and putting in these different affordable housing projects so we can better learn and understand what is going to be the most efficient, what's going to work the best, what's something that we can learn from going forward that can help us as we make new investments in this space. We've also created something called the Climate Careers Fund, because if we are going to really turn the needle or move the needle when it comes to making investments in new climate technology, we're going to need people trained and able to do that. And then we've got this flagship resiliency program that we operate with municipalities. As I said, you need a strong state partner if you're on the ground, and that means we've got to manage that, and we really want to think about equity when we're doing that. You know, a number of our environmental justice communities are also the same place where the asphalt batching plant is, or the big power plant. I had a coal-fired power plant in my community for a number of years, things like that. How do we ensure that we're thinking about the planning and helping, particularly in places that sometimes feel forgotten? That is critical as we think about the action items that we're going to need. I have a storage plant in Salem that was next to the coal-fired power plant that serves 5 community storage, and it's on the edge of the water. Not a great place as we're thinking about rising seas. We're going to need help and assistance from the state as we think about planning for those sorts of things. Where do you do? Where do you go? How do you move it? How do you think about that? No city or town can take those things on alone. So this flagship resiliency program is really part of those efforts. Those are just some of the items that come to mind when we think about addressing this climate crisis. And again, it's also it's certainly a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. If you think about the amazing ports and waterways and forests and parks and green spaces we have here, these are gifts from past generations. In my own community, so much public access along the water. People really thought long and hard about ensuring that no matter where you lived in our community or in any region, you could find your way to the water. So much of our success as a Commonwealth, so much of our industry support comes from being so close to the sea. How do we ensure we have an obligation to other generations to be able to participate in that? You know, Massachusetts, as I said, is not my natural home, but when I came here and came to Salem and found this place that welcomed people, you didn't have to have grown up there for 100 years. You felt welcome. My mom is from Trinidad. My dad is, he actually was born in Massachusetts. And, this is a place that had lots of cultures. You could right away feel like this was your hometown without having to have grown up there. And you had sea captain's mansions, beautiful Federalist-style architecture, right around the corner from tenement houses where people who worked on the docks lived. So lots of different incomes, cultures, people living in one place. But the thing that impressed me most, and it's not just unique to Salem, I think we find it throughout Massachusetts, is there's a certain restlessness that we're not willing to settle for the status quo, that we're looking to get better every single day, to figure out how to solve some of the world's toughest challenges, to truly make the impossible possible, and not willing to just expect it to happen easily. Like, we're really willing to work for it, putting some of the smartest people we have together to solve tough challenges. I think it's part of our legacy of who we are, and if you're a person who's like all about it, this is the place for you to be, because there are problems to solve, people who want to link arms with you and move forward. I think it's part of this revolutionary past that we have. As I said, I started my day in Lexington, getting excited for the festivities. Ken Burns was there, who's doing a new documentary on the American Revolution. He told me he had 500 hours of information that he has to edit down to 12 hours. And I said to him, like, what happens to the rest of it, Ken? Like, does it just go away? And he said, no, we're gonna make sure it ends up in an archival quality somewhere. But as part of that effort, he and we both reflected on the fact that 250 years ago on that Lexington Green, there were really just ordinary people there. They were farmers and merchants and blacksmiths and laborers who decided to risk it all, life and limb, on the hope and belief of something else, This idea of self-governance and fundamental freedoms and this idea of a democracy, they challenged the greatest military in the world at the time, the British Empire, and they won. They went from being subjects to citizens, and they believed in that collective action. So I'm struck on this upcoming Patriots' Day that if a group of ragtag militia pull together with an idea of hope for democracy could turn out to what it is today with all of our imperfections, the least we can do is come together to figure out how to make sure we protect and preserve this democracy, whether that's the work that we do as government officials or the work that we do to combat this climate crisis. That's why I get up every day and go to work. I hope that's why you're here and have been here the last couple of days, trying to get better, that restlessness of making the impossible possible. So thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. We need some balm for the soul today, right?
Yeah, and that, exactly.
Democracy.
And that was really it. Thank you so much. That was incredible. And really just such thoughtful and inspiring remarks. So as we're on stage today, I'm thinking back 7 years ago to when I first met you. You were mayor of Salem at the time. My mom was living in Salem at the time. And just through visiting her, I would meet Mayor Driscoll, now Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, on a regular basis. That's how present you were in that community. And that's not a small little town. You were just always so present there. I feel like that's the presence that you've brought to the Lieutenant Governor's office as well.
Thank you.
And so really, what are the sort of lessons learned from running a city like Salem, especially around climate resilience, but in general, that you've really brought from Salem to the State House?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. I think if you are involved in local government first and then end up in state government, that's a really good training ground to understand how the policies that you're able to shift and shape in this role and the funding that you're able to help influence can really make a meaningful difference within our communities. I think the governor and I firmly believe that the most important work that happens in impacting people's everyday quality of life, frankly, happens in local government, whether it's educating your kids or keeping your neighborhood safe or investing in fixing outdated infrastructure. And so for us, it's really trying to understand how we can be the best partner possible. I'd say it's also a recognition that we have 351 cities and towns and 351 zoning districts and 351 conservation commissions and 351, you get it, that make it hard to do the sort of regional planning that you really need to when it comes to something like mitigating impacts from the climate crisis. So how can we bring to bear the opportunity that we have to recognize that there are a lot of similarities between communities, particularly around geography and infrastructure, those challenges that they have, to help assist. If you're a local mayor or any kind of local official, you're super busy. You're talking about the 15-minute loading zone debate outside your window, and wow, how are we going to save this storage plant from ensuring that it is going to be preserved for the very important function that it plays. And so if the state can play a role in helping bring that expertise and those ideas and certainly help with funding of it under a collective nature, it's really a big assist. And we've tried to really up our game when it comes to helping communities both financially and more from a technical perspective with the planning and then with the action that's necessary.
That's amazing. Really appreciate all those points. And thinking about the climate resilience challenges in Salem, they're similar in some ways to the ones facing communities like Gloucester or Provincetown or New Bedford. I mean, we just have so much diversity amongst different cities and towns, right? But they can also be very different. So how is the Resilient Coast program starting to help coastal Massachusetts communities learn from each other and plan together?
I mean, it's so important that we have a framework that we can look through collectively when it comes to these coastal issues. I know many of the coastal cities have recently also formed an alliance so that they can get together to sort of share what their biggest challenges are from folks who are on the ground, and then being able to look statewide at shared opportunities. I had a historic port in Salem, so does New Bedford, so does Gloucester, But the coastline in Marshfield and Scituate looks a little bit different, and their challenges may be a little bit different. So for us, I think it's a framework that we can go through for both sharing information. Many of us have taken advantage of the state's planning exercises, municipal vulnerability programs. I should say it's not all coastal. We're talking about coastal now, obviously. And those plans, I call them the scared straight plans, because when NOAA comes in and tells you what things are going to look like in 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, and you start to see whole parts of your community not able to stay connected, or these very important resources that are so vulnerable, it really makes you recognize that we not only need to do the planning, we need to do the action. And so having a framework for how we accomplish that is really important, and how we can do it better. I mean, I'll take issue at our own permitting process. Some of the things that we're trying to do to improve and mitigate from the worst of climate impacts are really hard because of the permitting process that we have designed to protect our environment. We got to figure that out. We got to figure it out collectively.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So we have 2 more questions. We'll do the controversial one first, and then
Moments from a clean getaway.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I'm sure many of you know Lieutenant Governor Driscoll is a very well-known basketball player up in Salem. So the last one will be a free throw.
A layup.
A layup.
I was good at free throws. Layups.
That's a great point. So on the controversial question, what is your favorite beach or waterfront park in the Commonwealth?
Wow, that's not the layup? Jeez, okay. Well, I have an affinity for a place in Salem. We have this old Coast Guard seaplane hangar which has a lot of land around it, and we've turned it into a recreational spot. And there's a beach there, a small beach, but it's beautiful, just right on the sort of northern coast of Salem, and it's called Waikiki Beach. Okay, now. What I love about that is when my kids were little, it was an easy beach to take them to, like not a lot of traveling right there. You know when you have little kids and you go to the beach and you're there like 45 minutes before everybody needs to leave? And I'm like, we're planting the flag, we're here for the day. So this was a beach, if that happened, you could kind of, let's go. And they think it's the only Waikiki beach. So that's one of my favorite spots. But when we were really going to the beach and like we were gonna be there for the whole day, like we had to go up to Crane. And if you've ever been to Crane, it is, I mean, the trustees do an outstanding job, and it's a pretty special place, so awesome.
Great choices. Love both of those places too. Lastly, what is next for the Healey-Driscoll administration on climate resilience, and what new and ongoing initiatives, in addition to Resilient Coast or that itself, are you especially excited about right now?
I think for me, we have developed our own resiliency planning effort. We have new individuals and personnel who are working on those places and ways that we can help communities. So I'm excited to see where that's going to go. Looking to continue to invest in innovation. You know, in Salem, in one of our beaches at Collins Cove, we have corn husks along a living shoreline project with some saltwater plants, looking to, understand how we might be able to better mitigate from rising seas, and we're just losing so much shoreline. We're not going to be able to seawall our way out of this. So part of my joy is really seeing what we can leverage through some of these companies who are investing in climate tech and helping us understand how we can tackle these challenges in a way that's a little bit more natural, a little bit more tied into what we see for the different types of shorelines that we already have from a coastal perspective. I'm also excited about the climate tech and opportunities that we have that are outside of coastal communities. I mean, we're seeing inland flooding, we're seeing challenges everywhere. How are we going to better permit culverts, guys? Like, this is not sexy stuff, but we got to figure it out. How are we thinking about using some of those startup companies in climate to scale up programs and projects? Now, some of that's related to what we might do in the natural environment. Some of it's building materials. We have a company out of MIT and Cambridge who's figured out how to decarbonize concrete, Sublime. They have the R&D out of Cambridge, and they're building a new facility in Holyoke, Massachusetts. How about that? Taking the research and development in 617 and then building up the 413. We've got a company down the road in Woburn who is decarbonizing steel. So these are the sorts of opportunities we have in Massachusetts to be a leader in this space, to help build up and scale up these opportunities, not just to tackle what's happening with rising seas from the on-the-ground experience, but also to think about how we view land use. Many of our challenges around housing, and I just should say, that's our biggest challenge. Climate's a challenge, but right now, the people who can't afford to stay in Massachusetts, who are leaving, our ability to make sure that we have a generation of leaders who stay here, all this talent with all of these universities who need a place to live and maybe even want to buy their own home, we have to be able to build the sorts of housing. We've got to look at land use policies that can enable that to happen if we want to meet our climate and resiliency goals as well, which means more density, more smart transportation-oriented development, ways that we can convene the conversation around competing interests. How do I build housing and make sure that it's resilient at a time when we have a housing crisis? Those are the conversations that excite me, and I want to believe we bring the kind of adult in the room energy to governing that allows us to have them. Our environmental community and our building community can get together and figure out how we can meet both needs. Office to residential conversions, like it's a perfect example of this competing interest. There are some buildings that are offices that probably aren't going to be offices anymore, located in the heart of downtown Boston or the hearts of other downtowns, that we need to convert to residential. They're probably not going to meet the latest energy code, and there's really not a way to kind of make them meet the latest energy code. So the people who are living there, though, are probably going to have a better green footprint if they're able to live right in the heart of a place where you might work. Can we wrap our head around how we might do a little less here and a little more there when we think about the whole map, the journey mapping of sort of how people live? Those are the things that excite me, that we hope to get into, dig into, and frankly work with all of you to ensure that not only are we addressing climate, but we're building housing, creating an opportunity for growth, being the Commonwealth that makes the impossible possible.
We are so fortunate to have leaders like you and Governor Healy here in Massachusetts. So please join me in welcoming thanking Lieutenant Governor Driscoll.
Wow, what a great way to close out a fantastic couple of days. Please bear with us. We've still got just a couple of notes to talk about before we all head off and continue these conversations and continue this really great work. First of all, I think it'd be nice to announce our poster winners. So our Viewer's Choice winner, from macro to micro, assessing biodiversity across scales, Daniel Lopez and Melba Torres Souza. Would you please come up to the stage?
Yeah, you gotta say it.
Melba's not here, but...
Our Judge's Choice winner, The Impact of Breaching on Coastal Pond Water Quality by Faith Brooks. Faith is here, wonderful. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things. The Boston Winery address is 26 Erickson Street. There is a complimentary shuttle that's departing from the back of this campus center. It's leaving at 5:30 p.m. So time to grab a drink if you need to, but if you need the shuttle, then do head on over there after we finish chatting. The return shuttle, if you need to jump on that, is leaving Boston Winery around 8:15 p.m., which is when the event concludes. And it will make a stop at the Doubletree Hilton for anyone who's staying there.
And if folks didn't register, it's okay. We still have space.
Yep, there's space. So if you forgot to register, please come along and make merry. There's more than welcome. Don't forget to take a flower arrangement home with you. There's still some beautiful ones left on the tables, and you can take the pot as well, which is totally awesome. And don't forget, tomorrow, there's still loads of time to interact. Enjoy the sunshine. We've been inside for 2 days, so let's go outside and actually look at the water, look at the harbor. There's the Resilient Boston Harbor Cruise. There's the Coastal Resilience in East Boston, and there's Living Seawalls in the Seaport. And if you're still on the fence about the Blunders and Bloopers night tonight, delicious food, amazing drinks, Stories from fellow conference goers about times things haven't exactly gone as planned. I've got one.
I've got 5.
Ever CC'd the wrong project manager, left a tank of live mussels over the weekend and realized too late they had no oxygen, tripped and fallen going up to the podium. This is a night for you. Anything is fair game, and all welcome to share as you feel comfortable. But maybe just a final big thank you from me and Joe to everybody who's been involved in the event, to all of you for your time and generosity with your ideas. Can't wait for the next one.